Hello and welcome to the Herald of the Endtimes Apocalypse Hour. I'm your host, Grizzled Survivor, and I do have a guest today. I have, my girlfriend here. We'll give her a call sign for the show, so let's call her Furiosa for now. If you're a Mad Max fan, obviously you know what that is. But we're going to lead in with me, by myself, solo for a couple minutes here. Don't worry about this podcast being too heavy because after last podcast, we talked about some very serious topics, and I feel like everyone's well aware of what's going on in the world right now, and we can all use a break. So today we are doing a special, extra spooky episode of the Herald of the End Time Apocalypse Hour. Maybe not spooky in the way that you're used to, where we're talking about the very real dangers of contamination, nuclear waste, war, that sort of thing. We're going to go off more into territory we normally don't cover here. I'm not a big believer in ghosts. I don't really believe in spirits. If you watch the show, you know I'm pretty skeptical, and I don't go ghost hunting. That's not something we do. But we did go down what is supposedly Colorado's most haunted road, which is known as Riverdale Road. It runs between Thornton and Brighton. So we're going to cover a little bit of our trip there and talk about our experiences on that road and some of the background to the road there. And then also we are going to talk about movies, horror movies, sci-fi movies. What do you consider to be the best time to be a fan of those genres? And I'm not going off a personal bias here, because I feel like everyone's nostalgic for their own the movies they grew up with. They're nostalgic for different movies, but I'm going to try to objectively, Furiosa and I are going to sit down and talk and try to figure out what is the pinnacle of the best time to be a fan of horror and a fan of sci-fi action, that sort of thing, at least with the time constraints that we have. And so we're going to take a short break for channel identification, and then we will go into the first topic of Riverdale Road with Furiosa. We'll get her on the show here, so stand by. You're watching the Herald of the End Times Apocalypse Hour on the Grizzled Survivor channel. If you like what you're hearing, feel free to donate to us on Patreon, www.patreon.com/GrizzledSurvivor. Alright, we are back here on the Grizzled Survivor show. We are talking with Furiosa here, and we are, gonna talk about Riverdale Road to start with. So first of all, why don't you give us a rundown on your beliefs? Do you believe in ghosts?
I do not believe in ghosts, no.
So you're skeptical?
I am a skeptic, yes.
Okay. Why did you want to go to Riverdale Road?
I was curious to know if people did actually die there. I know, people said they did, but sometimes it's hard to know if they're just rumors or if it's real.
Okay. Did you think you were going to see anything too creepy when you went up there?
Maybe the phantom ghost car.
You thought you'd see a ghost car?
Yeah.
For those of you that don't know, I suppose we should run down real quickly for people, what happened on Riverdale Road. And just so I can get it's such an urban legend situation here that I'm actually going to pull up an article about it here, because it's one of those things where there's a lot of misinformation, okay? But there are some things that happened up there. There was a car crash. We saw the crosses for that. They crashed under an underpass there. And I can't tell if it's two crosses of the same person or two crosses because two people died in the crash. But there definitely was people that died in that crash. And there was a cold case there. In 1987, a girl's car was found on 112th and Riverdale Road. And then they found her body later on 89th in Riverdale, which is right by where it turns into Colorado Boulevard. It's a pretty hot spot for people to be. There's lots of people. Okay, so one of the legends about this place was that it was a mansion there in the early days, early 1900s, and this guy burned his family alive in there, and there's these gates on the hill. Now, I saw the gates on the hill, but they look like they're the gates of someone's property. Did you feel anything creepy about those gates? Did you even see those gates?
I felt like, I can't say that the gates themselves were creepy, but I feel like knowing and confirming that there was people who died there is sad, but it's also like puts you on edge because it's you feel like there is dangerous people on those roads for sure.
So it says a ghost jogger might chase you. Did you see any unusual people on Riverdale Road the entire time we were there? At least on foot. We'll get to the vehicles that we saw that were suspicious later.
No, just people who are real joggers.
Demonic activity still happens, and honestly, it says fresh graffiti, which you gotta understand, Riverdale Road's pretty remote. That's why there's fresh graffiti, folks, okay? Because people go up there because it's kind of in the middle of nowhere. There are a lot of houses, but the road itself is fairly remote. The houses are kind of all along pull-offs, or you have to go off the road to kind of get to anyone's house up there. Headless animals, they said, and I mean, there's deer and stuff up there. If you can catch a deer, cut its head off, and leave it on the road, I mean, you're pretty bold, you know, and you definitely have some hunting skills. But we didn't see any evidence of that up there. Ghosts swing from the trees. Did you see any ghosts swinging? They say they're the ghosts of slaves that were killed in the area. They hang from the trees.
I did not see any ghosts swinging from trees, no. Bloody
handprints on the signs?
No.
Well, because it says everyone thinks it's red paint, and then it's blood, but I didn't see any signs like that. The Phantom Camaro. It says because the road does have a lot of like blind corners on it, it says in the 70s, a Camaro was running down the road going too fast, crashed, and it will get behind you, and you'll know it's that particular car rather than the assholes who just get behind you with their brights because this car only has one headlight. But I never saw any of that. There's always a hitchhiker needing a ride.
No.
We didn't see a single hitchhiker on the road, and we were on the road for 2 hours. Native American shapeshifters roam.
No.
Okay, so those are like the big legends on that. So, what was your takeaway? We went there in the day, and we went there in the night. How'd it feel in the daytime?
It didn't feel scary. Like, it felt a bit... I felt a bit on edge, but I don't know if it's because I psyched myself out. But then at night, I felt more on edge because we did have a car follow us, and... it was really pitch black. There was no lights. Like, people do live up there, but not many people have any lights outside their house at all, which is a little weird, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it can be pretty dark up there for sure. There is a wooded area down by this farmland where supposedly there's some strange stuff, but you would really have to be bold to get down there. You'd have to park somewhere further down and walk up there, you know, which in itself could be pretty dangerous. It is a fairly remote area. What do you feel about all these legends on there?
I feel like they are something that you hear, like, when there's, like, a creepy road. But I didn't think that here in Colorado we had something like that.
And now there's actually another haunted bridge here out east of Aurora that we will be going to soon just to check it out because obviously I like abandoned. It's not an abandoned bridge, but it's a bridge out there. And once again, there's a murder that took place in that area too that's also unsolved. Not the same person that killed this girl in the 80s, but and it's completely different area. But you can see that these areas do have murders based on their remote location. And here in Denver, there was a big pattern in the 80s where people were killing girls mainly, and driving them out to, you know, remote locations, but in the grand scheme of things, not very remote. You know, Adams County, Weld County, sometimes up in the mountains where it is more remote. You know, and people do go missing in the mountains all the time. But if you're in, you know, these places, Riverdale Road, if you've never been up there, yeah, it seems like the middle of nowhere. Once you've been up there, you realize it's really not the middle of nowhere. There's a lot of activity on Riverdale Road. There's a golf course, parks, trails, houses. We saw a bunch of Thornton police on that road, but they don't go past the Thornton. See, this road goes out of Thornton into Brighton, and so halfway up the road, they don't patrol anymore. It would have to be highway patrol or sheriff up there. I don't know. What did you feel was more creepy, Riverdale Road or your first abandoned building that you went into?
It's hard because I felt like the first abandoned building we went to was pretty creepy, but I didn't feel so much on edge, honestly. Like,
even though you found like jail uniforms in there.
Yeah, that was definitely, that puts you on edge.
And like a little sacrificial altar with the bones on it.
Yeah,
Like someone's up there doing voodoo.
Yeah. It's hard to know what was scarier for me. I don't know if it's because I psyched myself out. I don't know it's because, to me, it's confirmed that people died on that road. It's confirmed that people died on that road to me. So.
Yeah. Well, you know, those are mysteries that, you know, hopefully they solve that cold case up there. It seems unlikely they're going to now, though.
Yeah, I think it's just because, like, I know for sure that people died on the road. I don't know for sure if anyone died in the building that I went to. Like, it just makes it more real when you're there. And when you see that people did die there, I guess. It just makes it creepier.
You know, we read about a lot of cold cases here in Denver. I actually read through the entire database because I was trying to see how many of the areas that we explore had some of these murders. And sure enough, you know, a lot of areas we have been on the show have had murders in them in the past. You know, or suicides. So you always do have to be kind of alert urban exploring. Certainly going into that building and seeing the prison uniforms there. They weren't there the first time we went there. If you look on our show, I don't remember the name of the episode, but we have gone in the building on the show. It was when we went north of I think it's north of Engineer Lakes, the name of the episode, I'm pretty sure. And that was the building featured in that episode. And the first time we went, there was very minimal human activity there in terms of, you know, the building looked like people had been in there but weren't staying in there. When me and Furiosa went up there was actually prison uniforms on the ground, and so it was a little bit unnerving. You know, you do kind of worry, what if we did run into someone? Thankfully for us, the building, it's small. It's pretty easy to see if there was anyone in there. There's not a lot of spaces for people to hide, and certainly the spaces that there are where people could potentially hide are full of broken wood and garbage. You would certainly hear them moving around. The first time we went, there was a homeless camp on the right-hand side that had been recently cleared out. It looks like there are either homeless people still down there, or, once again, there is a site that's been cleared out because there was a grill, the remnants of a tent, it looked like, down there. We didn't go and investigate. When I'm by myself, certainly I feel a little bit more bold than when I have Furiosa with me, just because, I mean, it's nice to have a partner for sure, but it's also easier to look out for yourself. And I feel like if I, you know, a girl is dangerous in this world for a girl, and I feel like people might feel more bold because they see her with me, whereas if it's just myself, I'm a pretty scary guy, and most people tend to leave me alone. And if they ask what I'm doing in the area, I tell them I'm an investigative journalist, which generally just gets them off my back anyway and isn't really a lie. We do a lot of investigative journalism here on the Grizzled Survivor channel. So that was our experiences with the Haunted Road. And I don't know, it was kind of lackluster. I suppose we really would have to go down there in the middle of the night to get any sort of really accurate representation of the hauntedness of the site. But I don't believe in ghosts, and I didn't see anything that changes my opinion on that.
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, I still won't believe in ghosts. I feel like if there is anything there that's paranormal, I feel like it's not something good. I don't feel like people, when they lose, like, their relatives, it's like they come back or anything. So the people that, to me, it's like the people that died are just dead now.
Yeah.
To me, they don't come back. Like, that's how I feel about it. People might disagree, but that's how I feel.
I mean, in as much as it is scary that there was a killer on that road or someone decided to dump a body up there, you have to remember that that was 33 years ago, and the chances of someone still killing people on that road after this amount of time, or the same person still being on the loose, is pretty slim. After 33 years, it would be a lot harder to strangle someone to death for sure, just because of the physical limitations of your form at that point. That being said, we did see some suspicious vehicles up there. What was the first one that we saw, Furiosa?
A weird white truck that was parked on one of the many trails. Like, there's a lot of trails up there.
Yeah.
And a lot, and they all have different parking areas. But this guy, it was a guy for sure. But he was parked there in his car for a while. Like,
I mean, we were on that road for 2.5 hours, and
he was still there, and it was weird.
He drove away right before it got dark, so But the second one we saw was even weirder. It was on our last trip up and down. When we were going down to get back to the starting point to turn around and go, well, it was after we got back to the starting point, we were coming up. There was like a minivan pulled off about 104th and Riverdale, and it was kind of unusual to see that car pulled off by the side of the road. But they didn't have their hazards on. There was no one out of the car. Everyone was kind of in the car. Didn't really look like they needed anything. So we went up the road, and we turned around, and we were coming back, and now the minivan is pulled into this like concrete factory. You can only pull in a little ways, and there's like a fence there to prevent you from really going onto the property. But there's a big sign that says like, read this sign if you're going onto the property, and they were pulled right over there. And for some reason that struck me as a little bit odd. Because, okay, you pulled over down at the first part of the road because you had automotive trouble, or you had to stop, or you had some cell phone call, whatever. But this particular spot to pull over was very odd. Because you can't get into the concrete factory. Any urban explorer is not going to park directly in front of the fence and hop the fence. Because that's just too visible. They would go in from the back route, or they would park further up and try to work their way back down. And it just struck me as odd that these people were there. Maybe they were ghost hunting.
All I know is, to me, I feel like you shouldn't even worry. If you personally believe in ghosts, I wouldn't worry about the ghost. I'd worry more about the people that are still like flesh and bones.
I mean, any remote area like that, a road like that goes between like the city and the outskirts, you very well may run into someone who has a negative agenda out there.
Yeah, I feel like you have to worry more about the people that are alive. I feel like when I was on the road, I felt like I was in The Walking Dead. Just like you have to worry more about the people than like the fucking zombies, honestly.
I mean, most of what I read, like regarding hitchhikers, for instance, is it's almost more dangerous to be the hitchhiker than it is to pick one up. A lot of hitchhikers end up dead. It's not an activity I would recommend. Honestly, if it came down to it, like your survival relied on like getting down the road 30 miles, I guess I would try to hitch a ride with like an actual like individual, like a truck. But even that's not 100% safe. Honestly, if it was me, I would just try to walk the goddamn 30 miles. If I had adequate food and water. Even 2 or 3 days. I mean, you could cover 30 miles in 2 days if you really wanted to.
I just feel like the thing that they misconstrued about the Riverdale Road is just the fact that they didn't really say, I don't know, maybe there's sketchy people out there.
Yeah.
I feel like there was weird people there. If you're there, like, really late at night, you're exploring, or you're just doing something you should not be doing. And even the people like that lived there, it was just really unsettling. It was weird.
We've had some weird encounters here in Colorado. Not even on the show, we've gone across some weird places. Just me and the audience here, but certainly, we've had some weird encounters. You remember that day we went down to Cherry Creek State Park down there, the reservoir. We drove by it the first time, and what did you see off the road down in the woods?
I saw people in black cloaks that looked like they were in a cult.
I mean, maybe they were just playing a rousing game of Dungeons and Dragons, But it certainly was weird.
It was weird. And it was a cloudy day, too, which I'm like,
yeah, it was kind of overcast. Not rainy, though, and they didn't look like raincoats. So there is some strange stuff going on here.
I feel like Colorado is one of those places where you don't really know what the hell is out there because no one talks about it. There's like only a few people that actually go out and explore these areas, but other than that, I feel like Colorado has a lot that is hidden.
Well, Colorado's a very diverse state in terms of you have mountains that are very remote, forests that are very remote. Go down south, you start to get into the open desert, which to me is the strangest area of America. Mm-hmm. I think that is where the weirdest stuff happens. To me, driving alone at night through Utah, New Mexico, Arizona, that just has a creepy vibe that can't be replicated anywhere else. Even driving in the woods, in the woods you feel like there's stuff in the woods watching you perhaps, but in the desert you just feel like its hills have eyes, like you're being watched the entire time you're there by some unknown force. And the desert's very unforgiving, and just how open it is. That's what the woods are very closed in. I feel like if there's something hunting you in the woods and you're good enough at survival, hell, that thing hunting you is gonna be the one that ends up having the tables turned on it. But in the desert, something could happen to you and you could just disappear and they would probably never find you. I guess it could happen in the woods too, but I don't get the same feeling about the Rocky Mountain region as I do about the open desert for sure. I do get a little bit creeped out about the desert.
I'd say I'd get creeped out about the desert too, but I mean, it's you do feel like people are watching you. You don't know who the hell's watching you, but you feel like they're watching you.
Yeah, I don't buy into conspiracy theories and stuff much for sure, but certainly if you'd like to hear them discussed more on this podcast, I don't know if I'm ever going to do a full-scale video series on conspiracy theories because I certainly, as I said, I'm a skeptic, and I don't want to spread misinformation to people who aren't skeptics, who might buy into the stuff that I might give them some new conspiracy theory to bite into. So I don't want to do that, but this would be the podcast. The podcast would be the place to talk about it, and I feel like this kind of sort of fits into conspiracy. Haunted this, haunted that, kind of fits into this category, and we normally don't talk about it, but today felt like we could use a break from serious stuff. And if you'd like to hear more conspiracy theories, comment down below. Tell me what you'd like me to research and discuss. And I know a lot, okay?
Or if you guys have any weird experiences that you can't explain.
Yeah, send them to us.
Totally even put a comment down below because we'd like to know, honestly.
Yeah, we're always on the lookout for videos of strange phenomenon, strange activity, strange things found in buildings, in the woods, in the rivers, anything that you come across that's strange, and we want your footage. I will put it up here and I'll give you full credit. But I'm certainly on the lookout, and I don't necessarily even have to share this footage with other people if for some reason you think it's something that, CIA drones or something. I can certainly be the sole curator of it, but creepy stuff like that we're certainly interested in. If you're some serial killer and you want to send us videos, though, do us a favor and just don't, okay? We're not interested in that. We're not interested in videos of people being harmed, animals being harmed, children being harmed, women being harmed, none of that. Don't send us anything like that.
But, I am myself am a skeptic. I have only had one encounter my whole life. That was bizarre, and I still can't explain what it was.
Well,
but
now would be the time to talk about it on this particular spooky episode.
So, I worked at a daycare that was next to a children's hospital daycare. And this daycare I cleaned there, and I got that job, so I wanted to make some extra money. I was still pretty young, but I was able to work there. And the buildings themselves are very bizarre. They're really weird. I don't know. I have a feeling they used to probably be old, hospital buildings. But they're now daycares, and the other two are used for college students who do presentations and stuff like that. But I had worked there for not that long. Because of this incident, I actually quit my job there. I could just not do it anymore. But there was times that I would be vacuuming and I could hear, I felt like I could hear my mom scream my name and call me. And I would, stop vacuuming. And she worked at the building right next to mine. So I was like, maybe she's calling me. I don't know what the heck's going on. But I'd be alone in the building. And then I had times where I thought I heard my sister call me. I had times where I would be closing all the windows and turning off the lights. And I'd hear just noises in the kitchen because they did have a small kitchen. And I wouldn't even go over there. That's how freaked out I was. One day, I was so freaked out, I dropped my vacuum because it's kind of like a little backpack. That's how you wear these sort of corporate vacuums that they give you for doing this sort of cleaning. But I dropped it and I ran out. I went next door to the other building. I told my mom what had happened, and I was pretty freaked out, and finally I just could not work there anymore, and I quit. It was really weird. I before then never had any experiences as a child, My dad passed away, never had any experiences then at all. Like,
I mean, I don't know, if I was a ghost and I saw some girl walking around with a vacuum on her back and a jumpsuit for cleaning, I'd probably think she was one of the Ghostbusters. I'd be terrified myself. You know, so that maybe scared him. I've never had any unusual, creepy experiences in abandoned buildings that couldn't be explained by ordinary means. Okay, so if you watch my latest music video, which is for an older song that was written by the Doctor and myself called Yachko, the footage in that video came from an urban exploration trip where we were told by the person we were out at this junkyard / missile silo to go in this trailer and get this gas tank for him. And you can see the gas tank in the video. And above the gas tank was 2 goat heads that had been like severed off a goat, and they'd been hanging there for quite some time because they were starting to skeletonize a little bit. And they were just hanging there, spinning in the breeze. And I always wanted to use that clip, first of all, when I saw that. You can even hear me, I'll put the original clip up at some point in time, and you can hear me in the clip discussing how I want to use those skulls in the video for that song. So I'm so glad I finally got to make that happen. But I mean, it seems creepy on the surface, right? Who's going to put goat heads in a trailer? But
it is creepy, but
I mean, it's explainable to me by the fact that you always see on, like, especially out west. If you grow up out east, you won't get it. But out here in the west and the southwest, and out here in the real west, not the Midwest, people like to have skulls. Buffalo skulls, goat skulls. Those make very good decorations for, like, a garden, like a cactus garden or like a barn. And so people do want that sort of thing. We went in the steam plant in Cheyenne, 14 years ago, Josh and myself, and we happened to see a headless pheasant hanging from a rope, and, a door that said, 666 Slayer, Steve will pay with his life, and life was underlined. But once again, I can't explain the pheasant, really, the headless pheasant. Someone probably hung it there to scare people, or, maybe they hung it there. There was a lot of pigeons. Maybe it was some attempt to control the pigeons by the owner of the building. Could have been the people that were out there threatening Steve. I don't know, but I wasn't really that creeped out. When you're in an abandoned building, especially at night, your mind is oftentimes not on the supernatural. You're more on, is the owner of the building perhaps around? Are there security guards? Are there dogs? Is there pitfalls I could fall into and get hurt in the dark? Are there homeless people that may be aggressive, or even if they're not aggressive, might alert other people to the fact that we're there? I don't worry too much about ghosts. In the steam plant, we opened up a door and we took about 3 steps away from the door, and we heard it slam shut behind us. But upon closer inspection, it was because the door had a weight attached. It's an old method of doors. A big, heavy metal door. When you push the door, a weight lifts up. And to help the door shut, when you release pressure on the door, the weight comes down and helps to slam the door shut. Well, we didn't know that. But it was certainly nothing supernatural. I've been to Chernobyl. Didn't feel any supernatural presence there at all. I wish it was as fun as the game Stalker, where there's unnatural phenomena happening everywhere. But really, it was pretty mundane, a cool urban exploration trip, but certainly nothing I could say made me a believer in any sort of paranormal activity.
All I can say for my personal weird experience was that I definitely don't feel like ghosts come back. I don't think it was a ghost. It could have been something that did not want me there for damn sure, because I definitely was scared and I quit my job. I even thought, I tried to debunk it. I thought maybe it was some homeless guy who was able to get in, because they sometimes, they leave the windows open. Maybe he just jumped in, ripped the screen open. I thought it was definitely my mom maybe coming in and freaking me out, or my sister, because they knew where I worked too. But all of those did not add up, and I still can't explain to this day what the hell happened. All I know is, I don't feel like it's a ghost. I don't fucking feel like... there's old pictures, so that building actually wasn't a part of, any old hospital. It was an old school before, but I don't feel like the kids came back and their restless souls are there. I don't feel like that at all. That's not what I believe in. I just know that it was weird. It scared me, and I got out, so...
Well, we're going to pause for a studio identification here because we are at the halfway point, and then we'll come back. We'll wrap up with our thoughts about ghosts for now. We'll probably touch bases on this more maybe towards Halloween, and then we'll continue on to the second topic we have lined up for the day. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back. Do you like what you're hearing here on the Grizzle Survivor channel? Then log on to Facebook and go to facebook.com/GrizzleSurvivor for news and exclusive photos you won't find here. Also, check out our Instagram at Grizzle Survivor for more exclusive photos and more exclusive videos from the channel. Thank you for listening. All right, do you have any final thoughts about ghosts while we're on the topic? Anything? I mean, we'll probably revisit it later on because it is a topic that people probably do like to hear about. Any further thoughts for now, or do you want to move on to the second topic here of movies?
Well, we'll move on to the second topic. The only last thing I have to add is, don't ever feel like if you do have a situation in a building that is weird and you can't explain it, or you feel like it's a ghost, or if it's even your job. Like, a lot of people have stories where they're, they were at their job, they had a weird experience, it was paranormal, it was weird, they couldn't explain it. Don't feel like you need to stay there. Quit. Honestly, that's how I felt. I wasn't even happy working there because of all these weird encounters.
I feel like this is a good transition because you see Furiosa is a Mexican lady, and you see white people, they'll stick around. You see it in a million horror movies. They'll stick around a house when there's like blood coming out of the walls. But Mexicans, they're like, no, just get the fuck out of there, okay? Like, don't stick around. Just fucking leave. The ghost can have it, like, get the fuck out. And that's one thing I do appreciate about her attitude. It's certainly no nonsense. So we're gonna move on to the topic of horror movies. Well, horror, and I'm kind of lumping sci-fi action in there. Maybe we'll just stick with horror today, and we'll come back and do a separate one for sci-fi, because I don't think 30 minutes is going to be enough to go that broad. Yeah. So let's stick to horror. I think the generally accepted, golden age of horror movies was the 1950s, but I don't feel myself like that is the best time to be a horror fan. Do you like 1950s horror, 1930s? Let's just say anything prior to, 1960s, so, Dracula movies, all those old Frankenstein.
I do.
I love Nosferatu. I love the old Dracula with Bela Lugosi. The Christopher Lee Dracula.
I feel like they were at the time very scary. But then also just I don't feel like it ever freaks me out to the point of wow, I can't even go to bed. If anything, it was just quite enjoyable. I grew up in the late 90s.
And early 2000s.
Early 2000s. And the movies were, I think what I was tired of seeing as I got older, I would say it would be ghost movies, paranormal movies, Ouija board and stuff. I might be pronouncing that wrong, but you know what I mean? It just... It's the same thing over, even Annabelle, it's Child's Play is the original, it's the best, it should stay that way. I know they even made a remake, and I thought it was, I didn't even see the movie, but...
Very few horror movies actually scare me, and we're going to get to the 2000s here by the end of this, because I'm going to argue with you, Furiosa, that was actually the best time to be a fan of horror movies, because... of reasons that we'll get to when I get there. But I don't get scared by very many horror movies. Very few unsettle me. I will say the original Hills Have Eyes, I did not watch that movie expecting it to be so brutal, and I was really taken aback at how violent and crazy and depraved that movie really is. Well, it's what I would recommend watching. But your view of the 1950s then was you liked it, even as campy as it was.
Yeah, it was so enjoyable. I feel like they put even a lot of more thought into the movie itself. Even the costumes, the way they dressed.
I mean, I feel like the 70s is when it really started coming around to being more like a modern horror movie.
Yeah, the 70s. A lot of the
structures we see in horror movies now.
70s was Carrie. Which
I think that was the 80s, honestly. When I think 70s, I think of the first Halloween movie.
Or, Halloween.
Friday the 13th, I think the first one of those was 79, if I recall. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I mean, that set the bar. Even The Hills Have Eyes was 1977, and for 77,
I think Texas Chainsaw Massacre was pretty thought out. I think the way they filmed the first movie was honestly, at the time, I think it was creepy. I think it was like,
yeah, I mean
the whole concept of cannibalism, you know, would scare anyone, and if it didn't scare you, then something's wrong with you. But
I still don't feel like, I respect 70s horror movies a lot. Like, to me, as I said, that was when you first started to see a lot of modernism creep in there. However, that being said, I still don't think that was the best time to be a horror movie fan. I'm going to still argue that it's not. So let's move on to the 80s. This is my bread and butter. I grew up watching these movies. You got Nightmare on Elm Street. Freddy Krueger's a classic. However, as the movies went on, he kind of quit being scary. He got goofy. He got silly. He's killing someone with a Nintendo Power Glove on his wrist. You know, like, stuff like that is just ridiculous.
Yeah.
I will say, though, since I don't get scared by horror movies, it might surprise you to find this out, but I love goofy horror, okay? And maybe not movies that try to achieve the goofiness, like, right off the bat, but, like, movies that are kind of inadvertently goofy and weird.
I mean, I agree with you there with, like, the 70s, though. I don't feel like that was a good time to be a fan of, like, horror.
I don't think it was the best time. I think it was a good time, but I
don't think it was great.
I still think it was kind of a niche kind of genre back then.
Yeah.
The 80s was certainly better.
I mean, they had Child's Play.
Yeah, there's the 80s.
Child's Play.
Know?
I mean, even people who grow up in my generation know about Child's Play. That's how good, like, Child's Play,
I think
Chucky
everyone
was.
knows who Freddy Krueger is.
Everyone knows who Freddy. It doesn't matter what generation. Everyone knows.
I feel like Jason kind of became more of a household name in the 80s.
I know Scream. Also.
Well, Scream was the 90s, I do believe. But you know, all of these movies kind of.
Well, they were. My point is, they're famous.
Yeah.
So famous that it doesn't matter what generation.
Well, I think like the Saw movies, which is why I'm going to get to my argument that the 2000s is so great for horror movies. Even though I personally don't like a lot of horror movies that came out of those years. I mean, the 80s is certainly my favorite. It might surprise you to find out that my absolute favorite horror movie of all time is Leprechaun in the Hood. I love that movie because it acknowledges it's not going to be a good movie right off the bat, and it just kind of runs with that concept. And since I'm not scared of horror movies, I mean, it's kind of, I like movies more like that. Furiosa's never seen the Blair Witch Project, but, you know, let's move on to the 90s, I suppose. 80s was more known for, like, these slashers, these supernatural movies, but tons of great movies. I
will add one thing, though, about Child's Play. Even I know this because I am a vintage toy collector, but I found this out through other people's YouTube videos, but apparently Child's Play was definitely influenced by this toy at the time that was like, it was called Buddy.
Yeah.
Those ones were scary. I will say 80s kids had a lot of guts to even have that in their rooms. Like, but it had the whole, like, overalls, the rainbow, like, it was creepy, and I feel like the concept to the kids, like, you know, your toy is gonna come to life and kill you.
Well, I think that's why they made Toy Story later on, was like, your toys aren't gonna come to life. One thing I'll say about the 80s as opposed to the 70s is certainly if you are a fan of, like, lesser-known films, the 80s had a lot more independent horror, little-known horror by, like, smaller studios. Italian studios really got in on it
Sleepaway
back
Camp.
then. Chopping Mall, like we watched the other day. Yeah.
Chopping Mall was actually
Return of the Living Dead's a great movie if you're a punk rocker.
Me and Grizzled Survivor actually watched it together. Chopping Mall, you hadn't seen.
Yeah, I hadn't seen it. I'd heard about it, but I hadn't actually watched it.
And it was actually pretty good.
I mean, I like Day of the Dead that came out then.
I hadn't watched Return of the Living Dead ever.
Yeah, that's a great movie from the 80s.
But it was amazing. Like,
you get a lot more. The practical effects they use in the 80s are certainly better.
They were not,
CGI
in my opinion, they were super realistic.
Yeah?
They didn't look so, like, goofy and just, like...
Yeah, I agree, kind of. Let's get to the 90s, because this is going to be my kind of point about the 90s, is you start to see this shift away from a lot of practical effects. Certainly early in the 90s, you saw it a lot more, but you start to get into stuff that has a lot more CGI, and even today, something that looks great on CGI today give it 5 years, even less than 5 years, give it a couple years, it's going to look like crap, okay? Final Fantasy Spirits Within. When that movie came out, it took... I remember they had an article about the computer farm that they had to make this movie happen. It was so graphically intense. And it looks hokey today, okay? It looks like something that you could probably do as a student in college.
I personally hated the 90s horror movies. I think that was, in my opinion, one of the worst years.
I think
I don't know.
I think you saw a lot of, like, horror... It kind of...
Well, for example, as someone who grew up like late 90s, early 2000s, I saw, of course, Scream.
Okay, yeah, that's the big one.
I think it was just so goofy to me. Like, too goofy. Like, the plot was just
honestly, I think
it was so obvious.
I think Scary Movie really killed a lot of the mystique of those. But I will say this, I was a teenager in the 90s, you know, and I watched a lot of horror movies with people because that was the thing you did kind of with, you know, you get together and you watch a horror movie and stuff like Urban Legend and stuff like that. And they all kind of had the same plot, you know, teenagers getting killed by some slasher and it's kind of ambiguous as to who it is and there's kind of a red herring, but in the end... I
don't think Scream was very...
I feel like Scream...
just kind of sat it there and and then you're like, okay, so I was right.
It gets lumped into my head with, like, I Know What You Did Last Summer.
Yeah.
To me, they're kind of interchangeable movies.
They're just very boring, in my opinion. Like,
but I will argue this: the '90s, and this is why I think that we're getting to the 2000s, and my theory that was the best time to be a horror fan. See, the '90s really precipitated, like, horror really started to make it more. I mean, the '80s that was making it into the mainstream, but the '90s, the horror movie was, you know, doing really well in the box office, and it kind of cemented itself as a movie that you can make with a lower budget. You know, Blair Witch Project was made with almost no budget. It almost, I mean, there was other found footage films before that, Cannibal Holocaust, that sort of thing, but it was what really brought that genre into the mainstream, and it was made with almost no budget, and they made so much money off that it's obscene. And without those successes of even Scream, without the success of Scream, the horror movies would have just been this, like, niche genre that only people that wanted to watch gore movies wanted to watch. Now, you know, directors and studios are approaching, in the 90s, approaching these horror movies like, wow, I could make a ton of money.
I will say, just backtracking a bit, but, like, going back to Sleepaway Camp, I think it was a bizarre movie, but I will say that their killings were creative. One of them was, like, this girl got killed by her hair straightener. I mean, that reminds... Like, I feel like it was super original. I had never seen that. As a fan of horror films, like, I never saw that.
I mean, it reminds me a lot of, like, where Final Destination drew some, like, inspiration from, which was a series I never cared for either.
That series, growing up, you know, late 90s, early 2000s, like, it was pretty... Honestly, as a kid, because I saw those as a kid, like, you get freaked out to do anything, to even go brush your teeth. But then when you're older, you're like, wow, that movie's so ridiculous.
Yeah. You know, and Bram Stoker's Dracula came out of the 90s, and that, like, set a standard for vampire movies for a long time. I think Interview with a Vampire came out of the same time period, and that was very... Lots of goths, you know, love those movies for obvious reasons.
Sleepy Hollow was
Sleepy Hollow was definitely...
I watched it barely this year, or last year, with Grizzled Survivor, but it was amazing.
You know, one thing I should say about the 70s and 80s, at least, too, before we get too far off, is, like, a lot of franchises that grew into action movies, like Terminator and Aliens, started off as horror movies in the 80s and late 70s.
By the way, I will say Alien was great.
Yeah?
It was good. I loved it.
Terminator was pretty creepy, too.
Terminator was creepy, too, yeah.
Definitely more of a horror movie. So now we move into the 2000s, and before we get too far on this, I'm going to elaborate on my point that I was making earlier about why I feel like from then till now has been the best time to be a horror fan, okay? Because of the boom of the 90s, the late 80s and the 90s. See, the 80s, a lot of franchises were fizzling out. The 90s created new franchises, and then you moved into the 2000s where you had movies like Saw. Those were huge box office successes. They definitely cemented to these studios that making a decent horror movie is cheap and will net you enormous gains, and so the horror movie became very popular. You saw a shift from the horror movie going from being rated X, being rated R, to being rated PG-13 to be more accessible. So you have to retain the scares without going the gore route necessarily, because an R-rated horror movie is not as great for your studio simply because, teenagers can't go see it. The 90s was the big boom of the teen slasher. In my opinion, I know that the movie trope was kind of tired by then, but that was the rise of it being a viable box office success. The 2000s saw franchises like Saw, and for the people that liked the 80s and the cult nature of films, you had major box office horror movies in the 2000s, the Saw series, and others I'm sure I kind of lost count. But then you also had a lot of direct-to-video, direct-to-DVD, lesser-known horror movies that were definitely pushing...
Even Scream still continued on.
Into the 2000s,
which honestly I wasn't expecting.
No, and my problem with the 2000s, I didn't say it was my favorite. I just will argue with you that the 2000s till now, horror movies have been more successful than ever, and you can make a horror movie and make your money back, and studios love shit like Annabelle, they love all these
my thing is I hated the Paranormal Activity movies. I was not into that.
The first one I thought was really kind of interesting. I mean, I watched a lot of them. I used to go every Halloween because they came out on Halloween, so you always had something to go see around Halloween.
I didn't like them.
Once again, I will say, following the trend of Leprechaun, my favorite Paranormal Activity is the one where they go to the barrio and like the vatos are trying to shoot a demon with a shotgun and stuff. Obviously, I'm gonna love shit like that.
Leprechaun was great. I think it was a series that they knew it was gonna be shit, but they worked with it and they were like, we're gonna embrace the shit of this and just like get it out there, and it worked for me because it did sell it. It sold it for me. I liked it, but I will say I just wasn't into like the whole ghost, the whole paranormal stuff. Like, it was just so like the same shit. As a horror fan, I want to see different stuff.
I feel like the downfall. So I saw a lot of the Paranormal Activities, at least the new. Like I think I saw up to number 3. The downfall of those movies was kind of what happens with like wrestling nowadays. Okay, you have a good concept and you take it, you make a movie, and you're like, wow, what a great concept. Like they did all, and once again, low budget, but it was creepy. They managed to get a creepy movie, but the ending kind of ruined the movie, okay? So then they they start to try to explain the lore of their universe, and I feel like that's where they really dropped the ball. Number 2, they set up I think it was number 2, they set up the interesting concept of like, the family made a deal with the devil and the kids are the ones that are like, they dropped the ball with it though because they just couldn't figure out where to go from there.
I just remember a lot of scenes where you see like people being dragged by a fucking demon or a ghost girl. It was just so boring. Like I got so tired of seeing that same scene is like used in like every 2000s movie that's related to paranormal. I hated that. It's like, come on, be creative. Demons and ghosts are supposed to be powerful, right? Give me something else.
Yeah.
Like Scary Movie, they were making fun of, they were making it more easy for you to be like, okay, wow, I recognize that's the Grudge, like.
Speaking of the Grudge, I mean, I think that, and it's something I'm not too familiar with a lot of Japanese horror movies, but I will say that what I've seen, they're very excellent. My problem with the Japanese horror movies is more, and this is something I don't like about any movie, really, is when you take a foreign movie and you remake it for an American audience. If you can't handle the Japanese version of those movies, then just don't watch them. I feel like they lost a lot in translation. I feel the same way about remakes of older movies. The RoboCop remake I never even bothered to see because to me, there's a great RoboCop movie. It came out in 1989. It's called fucking RoboCop.
It's fucking awesome.
Way. Let's just if you had the urge to remake the movie, just remaster the original and put it back in theaters, and I think it would do just fine.
Yeah, I personally never saw RoboCop. I knew about it, never watched it though. My parents didn't let me watch it. I was pretty young, but I did watch it as an adult, and it was amazing. And then to hear that there's a remake, I'm like, why would you kind of taint that first good movie and be like, okay, we're gonna throw another one in there? Like, I don't feel that movie was so great. We don't need a sequel. We don't need a sequel to it.
Well, they made RoboCop sequels that got progressively worse as most sequels
right,
do.
But my point is, don't make it when the first movie was already great. It was successful. Just release the same movie at a theater.
I feel like I'd almost rather see a sequel to it. Okay, like my case in point, RoboCop reboot was awful. I never saw it, but I've heard it's pretty awful. And maybe if you didn't have any experience with RoboCop, that was your first RoboCop movie, you might feel, better. But let's compare that to Mad Max 4. Okay, a sequel. Okay, yeah, 20 years past the last movie, but a sequel that continues on with a new story. I felt like being a sequel, it just was way, way more creative than it would have been if it was a remake of the first movie. And I'm more willing to accept a new story in the same universe than have you rewrite the old stories I've heard, but change everything I liked about it.
My point is just like, I'm not saying every movie didn't get, they could do a sequel and it might have even been better than the first one. I don't know, but my point is, like, something like RoboCop should have stayed that way. I liked the first one, and it was really great, elaborated. They knew what they wanted the audience to feel during that movie, and I think it should have stayed that way. I liked it.
Didn't they just do another Child's Play sequel?
They did, and it was awful, because it's like, oh, well, now we're in this age where you just, you can control your little toy on a phone. Then, so am I, like, controlling it to kill me on purpose? Like, I don't understand what the concept was at all. I hated it.
I think the longer these movies go on, like, think about, like, the Halloween movies. First one, he's a crazy guy, right? Mm-hmm. Second one, okay, he survived a lot of shit, but he's still a crazy guy,
he's still
right?
Crazy, yeah.
But you go to, like, Halloween 5, and they're like, he's possessed by some ancient rune, then the, like, constellation forms the sign in the sky. It goes off the fucking rails.
So, for example, for me, Child's Play was, like, creepy. I think the whole voodoo stuff creeped me out even more. But I just don't understand why they would have remade it and been like, okay, we're taking the voodoo aspect out of it. You're just gonna control this fucking toy on your phone. It's a security camera. I mean,
don't know. It's almost more realistic, though, that, like, a hacker could get a hold of that, and use that. That's the scary factor of it, I guess.
I guess, but it's just... it just doesn't scare me. It scares me more the way they had created that movie in my head. I mean, there was so many reruns. Every time on Halloween, you would see Child's Play. Like, the best movies, Child's Play was always in there. As a kid, I was freaked the fuck out. I, like, told my mom, like, throw away my fucking Barbies. Like, I don't want nothing. Like, that's how good it was. Like, it really truly made me believe that would happen. But then you go into, like, now, and I just feel like it was kind of just like, okay, well, Child's Play is a good name. Everyone knows who the fuck Chucky is. Let's just throw another movie out there.
Yeah, but you know
what? To
make
make some money.
It still made money, and that's the point. Nowadays, horror movies are so
it made money,
but
not from me. It made money, but not from me.
Like, well, I didn't buy into it.
No, I fucking call bullshit.
Well, instead of giving your money there, you can always go to our Patreon and toss us some money there if you like these podcasts. Surprisingly enough, though, folks, we're about 53 minutes into our hour, so we've got to kind of start wrapping it up here. Mm-hmm. It's been great talking about horror movies. If you guys are interested in hearing more, or you guys want to hear us talk about certain movies, certainly we'll be back on the horror movies. I'd love to do like a science fiction one, post-apocalyptic movies, obviously.
And we'd love to know what your favorite horror movie is.
Yeah, throw it down in the comments. Honestly, though, I'm going to tell you a spoiler alert for the post-apocalyptic episode. Okay, the '80s was the king of the post-apocalyptic movies. Okay,
yeah, it was.
That genre died.
Even
out.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, everything I've seen post like 1992 has been pretty shitty, minus Mad Max 4. And if there's anything that I missed, and we're not even on that topic yet, but we'll get there. But we'll talk more movies. It's a good podcast. When we have serious stuff to talk about, we got serious stuff to talk about. We'll have Greg on here soon. He's itching to get back into it here, and he's really been bugging me to talk about some topics. I love the guy to death, but his view of urban exploration is sometimes a little bit different than what we do on the show. But certainly we need to get him on to talk to you guys about ways to keep yourself safe from a virus and other things. He's got a lot of insight into protesting. He protested the Rocky Flats thing in the 80s, and he's been in protests before that. So he definitely is an old hand, and he can kind of give you guys, a baby boomer's opinion on a protest, like a real old school American view on a protest, and I think you'll be surprised at what he has to say.
Yeah.
But when we do a serious topic, I'll try to follow it up the next week with something kind of less serious.
Yeah.
So it's been nice. If you want to hear us talk more about conspiracy theories, certainly I can do that on this on this podcast. If you'd like me to do a series on conspiracy theories, I will. We're still working more into the Doomsday Cult one, but the scripted episodes take a lot longer to do than these freeform episodes. And I got to a big hole in the script of this next episode because the next Doomsday Cult episode kind of explains how we analyze these cults, and so definitely important for me to get it right, and I don't want to do it half-assed.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, as an adult, going back to horror movies, I think you appreciate more, like, what it's, I mean, if it still scares you as an adult, then it probably is a good movie.
Yeah, if it still unnerves you, it's definitely good,
I think I feel like that's how I can tell if it's a good movie still.
I mean, I'm at a point now, as a video file and as an audio file, where I'm looking for the weirdest audio recordings and the weirdest radio broadcasts and the weirdest actual footage I can find.
I mean, Grizzled Survivor mentioned this idea to me, but we're gonna try to, like, go to thrift stores.
Yeah, and buy unmarked VHS tapes of, like, home movies.
Or even cassette tapes, because you see a lot of those.
And we'll see what we find.
No one really cares about them, but then I'm like, what if there's something weird on there? You never know. So we're gonna look for that, and if we find any footage at all, we will totally share it with you guys.
We're laughing because our cat is, like, up on top of, like, some books on the bookcase, and he's only got, like, a foot's worth of room, so he's, like, wedged between the books and the top of the shelf, but he seems cozy. So
now that's scary, though.
That's scary to you?
Being uncomfortable.
Yeah, if you're not comfortable. Speaking of that, you can swing on over to Grizzled Gear, and we've got some merchandise for sale. We're working on channel merchandise as we speak, but we've got some military surplus gear.
Yeah, we got
some knives in.
Good ideas. If you guys want to see anything specific for any merchandise for Grizzled Survivors channel, totally leave a comment below if you have any.
Shirts are the big thing, but I mean, I can do hats, I can do knives, I can do whatever you guys think will sell. Whatever you buy, I'll fucking get it, okay? And, go to my Grizzled Gear Facebook page. And, if you have a request for a specific piece of gear, a gas mask, a piece of military gear that's kind of off the wall, hard to find, shoot me a message. I may be able to help you with that. And that's one way you can support me, support the channel without being obligated to do, like, a monthly subscription through Patreon or anything like that, although you do get exclusives through Patreon, including access to my extensive vault of urban exploration pictures from the early 2000s. Mm-hmm. I have thousands of pictures of missile bases, all sorts of crazy stuff.
We're going to have access to a better vehicle, so we will be doing more...
We'll be doing some ghost towns outside
Ghost towns, totally check Grizzled Survivors Instagram, because we both have Instagrams, but his is obviously more viewable for you guys. But
yeah, we may set Furiosa up with one specifically for her, like, persona here on the channel.
But check those photos out, because we totally have been doing more explorations. And if you guys want to see those buildings or know where they're at and go yourself, totally, like, check it out. But
yeah, check it out. I mean, we don't really give out our locations very much, but certainly some of the buildings we go into are good for starters. Definitely, if you're interested, I can at least give you a starting point. Soon on the show, we're actually going to be doing a quick little book review of a book that was written by a very prolific urban explorer who actually died from contamination that he received out urban exploring, called The Art of Infiltration by Ninjalicious. And I will give you some insight into how I feel about the book and how useful it is, and it's a very good starting point for people that are looking for a place to start. We've got about a minute and a half left of airtime before we are done.
But
so
I appreciate you guys if you do like I mean, I don't know if anyone cares if I'm on the channel,
well, we have a Riverdale Road video coming too. We took footage, so if you see anything we didn't see, we saw Pennywise painting.
I recorded that. Sorry that I'm like definitely no expert at all. So
there was that creepy Pennywise painting that was pretty.
Yeah,
cool.
that was cool.
So make sure you tune in to see that. We're not going to talk too much because we only have about a minute left, but I do want to say thank you for joining us here on the Grizzle Survivor channel today. And whatever you do, stay safe. We're still in the realm of coronavirus, and certainly there's always creepy people out there looking to take advantage of someone. So be safe, stay alert, train yourself, train your body, train your mind, train anything that you can train. Train for the situations that you anticipate, train for the things you do if you're urban exploring.
But I personally appreciate you guys even listening to this podcast, if you will. But stay safe out there, because we are in the time of protesting still and the virus. But thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is Grizzle Survivor and Furiosa signing off, and we will catch you next time.